Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Leslie presents. And now your host, Paul Leslie.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome one of the world's great songwriting teams. It's a great pleasure to welcome Alan and Marilyn Bergman.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Pleasure to talk to you.
Most stories are best from the beginning. Before you knew each other, what was life like growing up?
Terrible. No. We both grew up in Brooklyn.
And we had very similar,
upbringings.
yeah.
Lower middle class families, both with mothers who were determined that their kids would be exposed to culture. So at that time, there were a lot of free things going on in New York. The Philharmonic, for example, had free children's concerts every Saturday morning at Carnegie Hall.
And unbeknownst to each other, our mothers took us there.
We were there at the same time.
Yeah.
Many rows apart.
And years.
Not that many.
So that was terrific.
And we both went to rather progressive schools, chosen carefully. It's amazing how similar our backgrounds were. Schools also that encouraged reading and writing and, open classrooms, that kind of thing.
Do you ever wonder if you met before you officially met?
Well, I don't think we met, but we were certainly in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
What about early music loves? What did you all listen to?
Well, there were two in that class. First of all, the classical music, because, every Saturday morning we had the Philharmonic.
And there were music appreciation classes in the schools in those days, which, at least we got to hear and learn the language of classical music when we were very young.
And then there was that marvelous music that came from the Broadway stage, written by the great songwriters of those days, the Gershwins, Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, and we grew up on them. We would sneak in the second act of all those shows. We didn't have enough money, so we would wait. Oddly enough, we both did this, unbeknownst to each other. We'd stand outside and go in on the second act with the crowd, and if there wasn't a seat, we'd stand. We saw a lot of second acts.
There's a poetic justice about this, because now we see a lot of first acts. We shouldn't be saying this, but there are songs we walk out of.
Well, there's a symmetry there.
Well, you mentioned a name there, Cole Porter. So what lyricists have influenced you the most?
Well, I had one of the great lyricists as a mentor, Johnny Mercer. And
wow.
He spent quite a bit of time with me, encouraging me, disciplining me, and teaching me, really. I would not be here talking to you without him.
Thank you, Johnny Mercer.
Yeah, thank you, Johnny Mercer. And then, of course, all those I previously mentioned. We're still learning. We learned from Stephen Sondheim all the time.
What was Johnny Mercer like as a person?
Oh, he was wonderful. He was
complicated.
Yes, very complicated, but
he came from Georgia.
Yeah, not far from where you are.
Savannah, Georgia.
That's right.
Savannah, yeah. But it's hard for me because I loved him, and he was so good to me. And Marilyn too had a mentor from the lyrical ranks.
Very good lyric writer named Bob Russell, who was really a pop song lyric writer. He did a few films, but mainly he wrote songs. He wrote Don't Get Around Much Anymore with Ellington and Do Nothing Till You Hear From Me. He wrote Brazil. He wrote a lot of very good songs. I used to play the piano for him. That was my after-school job, because he was a lyric writer who didn't play the piano, and there were no CDs in those olden days we're talking about.
No tape recording.
There was reel-to-reel tape, but that was very cumbersome. So if there was somebody who would play the piano and play these songs, these melodies, over and over for him as he worked, that's what I did. He told me later, when I came out to California, where he had moved from New York in my college years, during those years, he moved out here, and I came out here at one point because my parents had moved here. And I said, what am I going to do in this place? I don't know anybody, and I don't know what to do. And he said, write songs. I said, what do you mean write songs? He said, well, you learned more than you did those years that you were playing for me. So he introduced me to a young composer. And the first song we wrote was recorded by Peggy Lee. And then he introduced me to Alan, with whom he was working in the afternoon. He would work with me in the morning, and then he would go work with Alan in the afternoon. And he introduced us, and the three of us started to work together. And one of the first fruits that ripened was a song called Nice and Easy for Frank Sinatra. And I think that kind of made us think, well, maybe this is serious and we can make a real career out of it.
Well, what was your first impression of Alan Bergman?
Oh, my dear. Well, actually, before I even met him, the first time I saw him, he was walking on there was one street in Hollywood, Selma, a street called Selma, near Argyle, where all the music publishers had offices. And I saw him walking on the street there one day, and he was wearing, in my memory, a dark overcoat, and he was carrying a briefcase. And he didn't look like anybody else in Los Angeles. I thought he looked like he just got off the train from someplace back east. And I thought he looked like either an accountant or a door-to-door salesman. I mean, matter of fact, he was a door-to-door salesman. He was going to the publisher's offices trying to sell his songs. But that was actually the first time I saw him. But the first time I met him, I really don't remember, other than the fact that we started writing that very first day, the three of us, with this composer who introduced us, whose name was Lou Spence. And we started writing, and there was a common language and communication, and we wrote a terrible song that day, but we realized that there was a collaboration possible there that might be interesting. So we continued working together, the three of us, every day. We would meet at about 10 o'clock in the morning, and we would work until 5:30 or 6 o'clock. So after the better part of a year, I think, we got to know each other very well in those hours every day. And then we got a call from Frank Lesser, another great writer whose work, I think, influenced us greatly as well. He had already written Guys and Dolls and Where's Charlie and a couple of other wonderful things. And he had a publishing company, and he had writers under contract. And he called us and asked us if we would come to New York and consider going into this stable of writers. It was during that trip to New York that we had really probably what was our first date. Right, Alan?
Yeah. It was near Christmas time, and we walked a lot on Park Avenue.
In the snow. I think it happens in that trip to New York. We never signed the contract with Frank Lesser for reasons that are not important, but we later signed a contract with each other, a marriage contract.
Yes.
This question is for Alan Bergman. What was your first impression of Marilyn Bergman?
Well, I remember walking up. We went to work in her house.
My parents' house.
Her parents' house. And she was waiting at the door. There was a kind of a long walkway and I saw her. And as I got closer and closer, I knew that this was a very special, remarkable woman. And that's
all of this from walking up the walkway?
Yes,
wow.
Yes. But there it was. I knew there was something special about her.
When the two of you are writing a song, what is that process like?
Well, that's like pitching and catching. One is very verbal. We prefer to have the music first. It goes back and forth, pitching and catching. Like one is the
pitcher and one is the catcher.
Yeah. Well, and one is the creator, one is the editor, and that goes back and forth within seconds. And when we get four or so bars finished that we like, I sing them because it's very important. Now, lyrics. Most important function of a lyric is to sing, and so I sing along with the tape.
And he sings very well.
As we progress, we hear it and sing it and continue writing.
And sometimes it's good, and sometimes it's not.
and then the rewriting comes in because things like songs, like anything else, are not written; they're rewritten over and over. Keep trying to make it better.
Earlier you mentioned the song Nice and Easy.
Yeah.
Tell us about that song.
Frank Sinatra was making an LP, an album in those days, of lightly swinging love songs. and he wanted to. His manager sent out a call, and I'm sure every songwriter within a very far or near distance wrote a song trying to get the title song for that LP. And you know, when you write for somebody like Sinatra, that he's a piece of really theater, you try and write a custom-made suit for him. So we came up with this idea of Nice and Easy, which we thought would fit him, and he did too. Of all the songs that I'm sure were written, ours was chosen.
Tell us about putting the lyrics to The Windmills of Your Mind.
Well, Nice and Easy was, I believe, in 1960 or 61. And a few years after that, Alan and I continued writing together, and by now we were writing with other composers as well as Lou Spence. We were introduced to Michel Legrand, who came over to do some PR, I think, on The Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
No, the Young Girls of
Rochefort, which he had just finished. It was the second musical after. It was the musical after Umbrellas.
Yes.
Somebody introduced us to Michel, and that was really a marriage made in heaven. I have to back up a little bit, if I may. One day, Quincy Jones called us and asked us if we would write a song with him for a picture called In the Heat of the Night. That was Norman Jewison's film, and he wanted a title song, which was to be sung by Ray Charles. Well, I mean, that was a heaven assignment. So as a result of that, not only did we write the song, but our relationship with Norman Jewison was born. And so on his next film, or one of his next films, he called us and asked us if we would write some songs for the film with
the Thomas Crown Affair.
Yes, with Michel, who he wanted to do the score for the film. And one of the sequences of that film, now I'm finally getting to answer your question, one of the sequences of that film was a glider, a sequence. Steve McQueen was flying a glider. He had just finished masterminding a very complicated bank robbery. There were a lot of problems, and he went up in this glider to think it out, I think. And Norman said that he wanted a song in this silent sequence. When we saw it, it was long and there was nothing but perhaps the sound of a little wind. He said he wanted a song that would just underline this whatever mind trip was happening to the character. So, I don't know, Michel wrote about 7 or 8 wonderful melodies, one different from the next, and we all chose this one, which was an unlikely melody. We thought it would be something more agitated or whatever. We chose this melody. I don't know where this lyric came from. I really don't. It might have been, Alan thinks it had something to do with the circular movement of the glider.
And with anxiety.
And the restless thing. I don't know, but I think my take on it somewhere in my brain was the feeling of going under anesthesia. There was a kind of, I don't know, circular disconnect of thoughts. It's very hard to explain because I don't think either of us really know where that song came from.
Well,
but we're grateful for it.
Yes, except that we did have, as the scene as Marilyn described, and also the intention of Norman Jewison, the director, to tell us that he wanted us to underline the anxiety of the character.
Probably one of your most celebrated songs is The Way We Were. What was the inspiration behind that lyric?
Well, that sometimes the stars are right. You have a great movie, a fantastic director who understands music and song, Sidney Pollack, a marvelous composer, Marvin Hamlish, and the singer, the best singer in the world, Barbra Streisand, to write for. So that's a lot of good things.
And a title.
Which is this.
This and The Heat of the Night were the only time we got to write titled songs, where the titles really were valuable to us.
Provocative for a lyric.
Right. The Way We Were was the title of Arthur Lawrence's book on which he based the screenplay. And it was a wonderful title. And as Alan said, we got to write for, the best singer in the world.
And Sydney's knowing the power of a song and music. The function of the song, the first time you hear it, is a corridor back into time, taking you back to when they were in college. And that's the first time you hear it. The second time you hear it, which is most important, is at the end of the movie where the two characters meet. They haven't seen each other in years.
They meet by accident.
And you hear the last half of the song, which brings you back to their life. So in both cases, it's taking you back into time, the way we were.
On that note, the new album from Barbra Streisand.
Yes.
What did you think of the album featuring your lyrics, the album entitled What Matters Most, that Barbra Streisand recorded?
Oh, please.
Well, aside from the fact that it's such an honor to have her honor us with this album, we find it very difficult to be objective about her because, yes, as you heard, we do think that she's extraordinarily talented as an actor and as a singer and as a director, and it all comes into play when you listen to her sing. And as lyric writers, there's nothing that she doesn't uncover in a song. She finds layers that maybe we didn't even know were there sometimes. And that dramatic ability she has, that intelligence, coupled with this glorious voice, I don't know. It's
and she's recorded about 64 songs of ours, and it's a thrill, a privilege.
Every time.
So many people have recorded your songs. Frank Sinatra, Rosemary Clooney, Tony Bennett, Fred Astaire, Ray Charles, Barbra Streisand. Is it possible? Could you pick a favorite interpretation of one of your lyrics?
God, that's very difficult. When you say Fred Astaire, I think of that face. When you say Ray Charles, I think of In the Heat of the Night. When you say Tony Bennett, I think of How Do You Keep the Music Playing. When you mention Rosemary Clooney, I think of Where Do You Start? And Barbra, I think of 64 songs. And we've been graced, and that list made me catch my breath for a moment. I never thought of it quite that way, but how lucky can you get?
Yeah, it's quite amazing.
It is, isn't it?
Could you pick a favorite composer that you've worked with?
Oh, that's just as difficult. We've really had not only the pleasure, but to write the melodies of not only Michel Legrand, but Dave Grusin,
Marvin Hamlish,
Johnny Mandel, John Williams, Henry Mancini. There are so many.
That's as stunning a list as the list of singers.
Yeah.
What is Marvin Hamlish like to work with?
A joy.
He's absolutely a joy.
A joy. He's quick-witted. He's quick-thinking. He's quixotic.
He's so enthusiastic.
And he's so talented.
Yeah.
He's so talented. And he can execute at the piano. All of these names that Ellen just mentioned, they're all able to execute immediately at the piano what they hear, which is remarkable. The ability to not only to hear it and to think of it, but to express it immedately so that we're turned on immediately. Sometimes it's not immediately.
No.
I should take that away.
We feel there are words on the tips of those notes, and we have to find them. That's our exploration.
Could you pick a lyric that is the most meaningful to you?
Oh, meaningful. Well, the most meaningful lyric at this moment, it might have been different had you asked me the question a year ago or a year from now, but at this moment, I think what matters most is probably, it speaks to, I think, what we believe and what we really feel about relationships and about loving. It's with a beautiful piece of music by Dave Grusin, who's a wonderful composer and a great pianist and a great friend. And that lyric, and I listened to it a lot lately because of Barbra's remarkable record, I think says for us what, it's almost as if somebody else wrote it and it's speaking for us, but I feel deeply about that at this moment.
What makes a good song a good song?
Well, I think the combination of a unique melody and an original lyric.
You know, we always say to each other when we finish something and we don't have an immediate feeling about it, what the world does not need is just another song. There are millions of songs, and unless you have something to say, it's like anything that you write. What is it that you have to say that's either not been said before or not been said before in this particular way? So I think a good song, first of all, there's what now is a dirty word, but we lean on it very heavily, and that's craft. Alan said earlier that one of the first obligations of a song is to sing, to be able to sing. That's what makes songs different from poetry, for example. I mean, lyrics have to sing on the notes that they're married to and feel good to a singer. Not only that really determines, to a great extent, the writing of a lyric, but the idea. What is it that you're saying? And can you say it perhaps in a way that's not been said quite that way? That's a funny answer to your question, isn't it?
I think that was very well put. This is a question for both of you. What is the best thing about being Alan Bergman? What is the best thing about being Marilyn Bergman?
Well, I mean, we have an extraordinary life together. We love what we do. A real passion about writing. You do it with somebody you love, and in addition, have a wonderful family of a daughter and a granddaughter. What could be better? It's extraordinary.
For my last question, what would you like to say to anyone who is listening to this?
After you asked me the question about something about what lyric, I don't remember how you phrased it, and I said what matters most. I think this is chaotic time all over the world. It's like all the pieces have been thrown up in the air, and they're there because it was broken. It is broken. And I think we're trying to find a way to put pieces together in a better way and to heal the world. Occasionally, somebody writes a song that says something about that. I would love to write that song. We haven't. I think there's maybe a song that could contribute to a little healing. But first you have to break it up, and that's what's happening now, and I think that's healthy. We have to look forward to putting the pieces back together again.
And hope for peace.
Thank you very much. I have greatly enjoyed.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
It was a pleasure talking to you.
Yes, thank you for calling.
Thank you very much, and a good day to you.
Thank you, and to you and your listeners. Bye.